go into marketing, and next thing you know, you're in an operating room for brain surgery.
I scrub into surgery, brain surgery, which, mind you, I could never even watch Grey's Anatomy.
Explaining neurology or getting the doctors to participate on camera, which is more difficult?
My fail was that I thought I could.
This is the Sorry for Marketing podcast. I'm Al Ludwig at Ludwig the Marketer on all platforms. We're at the Garage Studio in Baton Rouge, and big thanks to Gordon McKernan Injury Attorneys for making all of this possible. Today I have Elise Hamilton here with me, Director of Marketing at the NeuroMedical Center, and I want to get into who you are, but before that, I have to ask, what's a bit of marketing that you're sorry for?
I am currently working on a deep brain stimulator project. And so we received a grant from a company to make an educational video for patients who are going to be going through this procedure. And so in previous roles and at the NeuroMedical Center, I have been a one-person marketing department.
Which is common at many places.
Yes, very common.
In our world.
And in our world, yes, very common. And, you know, you learn to wear a lot of different hats, you know, doing all the different roles. And so, you know, I went into this project where they needed us to film. And so I scrub into surgery, brain surgery, which, mind you, I could never even watch Grey's Anatomy.
As someone who was getting into the marketing field, did you think you were ever going to say, yeah, I scrubbed into brain surgery?
Never, never. I mean, could never watch Grey's Anatomy, never thought about going into the medical field, you know, was just never my thing. And so here I am at the lake, you know, in scrubs, mask, the whole 9 yards. And I'm with my stabilizer and my phone.
There you are, right there.
Yep. There's us and our crew at JCW.
So this is before you're going into the operating room for brain surgery.
For brain surgery, just casual.
As the lead operating room marketer.
Yep. So just casual, you know, just another Monday. But yeah, so we went in, and so originally before I went in with that group, it was just me. And so I had my stabilizer and my phone, and I'm trying to get the shots of brain surgery, you know, the surgeon, but then also the doctors, because mind you, this patient was awake.
Oh, God.
So, you know, during the surgery, the patient's awake because they're having to test different things. And so long story short, my fail was that I thought I could film everything, capture the story, you know, get the doctor's perspectives, ask them questions, all at the same time. And I realized this is more than a one-person job. You know, this is something that we need multiple people.
While I'm sure there's like 8 people in the operating room, all with one specific role.
Of course. And they tell me, you know, you can sit here and get this shot, but you can't step over this line, and you can't touch this, and
that has to be nerve-wracking.
Very nerve-wracking, because here
were you like in there, camera on gimbal,
camera on gimbal. I'm literally like over the surgeon's shoulder, you know, trying to capture, you know, what he's doing, but then I'm also trying to get the patient's perspective.
Like I want like a marketing intern in there with you, just with a phone, filming me doing this. I mean, that's interesting.
It was such a cool experience. And so all in all, I would say the fail is that, you know, the expectation of I can do everything, you know, I can do all 10 roles by myself. And so I went to leadership at NeuroMed and was like, look, in order for this to look exactly how we want it, you know, I'm going to need people with professional cameras. I'm going to need, you know, somebody in the background helping me direct. And so that's when we hired, you know, our external partners. I think that's kind of pivoted into, you know, one of the things I'm proud of is that now, you know, learning through some of these mistakes, you know, originally with this project, it's like now it's going to turn out to be fantastic, you know, because I'm able to kind of direct behind the scenes.
So you did that one brain surgery, and so then I guess you had to go do the second brain surgery of your career.
I've actually with
JCW helping.
I've actually I think I've been in 6 brain surgeries now. So I originally 6 brain surgeries, and I've done 3 spinal surgeries for a different project. So, you know, I'm pretty much a brain surgeon myself at this point.
What's been the most just interesting moment being in the operating room for brain surgery as someone with no experience in the medical field?
Yeah, just being in that environment, one, is just fascinating in and of itself, because, you know, I'm not used to that medical, you know, the lingo and, you know, the process, but really seeing, because this specific procedure, the patient's awake. they're implanting a device in the brain to be able to stop tremors
They're
for Parkinson's.
awake. That just blows my mind.
Awake, fully awake. I know. When they first
You
told
could
me,
see their brain?
I could see the brain. I know. I've seen a lot of things that I never thought I was going to see.
Do you have, is this like something you can send me?
Yes.
Like this
I don't know if I could put it on here, but I could definitely
send it. I am so curious about this video, and because my mind will also go into the as a marketer, right? Go into the execution of it, how it all came together.
What can you show? What can't you show?
Are y'all putting extra lighting in there?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, JCW, they brought all the
are the
tools.
doctors mic'd up?
The doctors
or do y'all have
weren't
like
mic'd up.
one boom mic or
We had
anything?
a boom mic.
Yeah.
We had the 2 cameras. But yeah, just really being able to, with different marketing projects, you do, you check certain boxes, and then you move on to the next project. Mm-hmm. Whereas this project for me has been so impactful because the patient's awake, they're implanting this device, and they go from having severe tremors to completely having a still hand in front of you. And you see the patient almost in tears, because patients who have been dealing with this for decades, who have never been able to hold a cup or hold a pencil, now right there in real time, we're seeing them, have their tremors gone. And so really being able to capture that on camera, capture the doctors in those moments, and seeing how impactful these procedures are. I'm like, this is such a big deal for me to be able to now have this video that we're going to be able to send to prospective patients who are thinking about doing this procedure, send this to doctors who would like to learn how to do this procedure this specific way.
So it serves like a marketing role, but also serves an educational role
100%.
for other partners.
Yes, absolutely. Because there's doctors across the United States who do this procedure in different ways. And so this way it's a lot quicker. It's a lot faster, so the patient doesn't have to be on the operating table awake with their head open for 6 hours.
Well, the studio is very versatile. Brandon, do you think that we can do like an operating room version of the studio? I would love to experience that.
Puts masks over us with the scrubs.
I don't know if it's going to be sterile enough in here, but God, that
may not be up to code, but
that's insane. Just kind of hearing that, and it brings to point to me how in our little world of marketing, when you decide to go in there, you truly don't know where it's going to bring you. Where if you become a doctor, a specific type of doctor, or a specific type of lawyer, you kind of know where it's going to bring you. There's going to be surprises along the way, of course, but you go in the marketing, and next thing you know, you're in an operating room for brain surgery, right?
Right.
On my end, next thing I know, like we're doing these NIL deals, and we're buying 8,888 Jello shots at Omaha for the College World Series, and getting our athletes on camera on ESPN with their hats. And it's like, I would have never expected that, taking a role as a marketing director for a law firm, right?
Right.
And so that's really cool that the NeuroMedical Center is prioritizing getting that type of content and making that accessible and promotional for themselves.
Absolutely.
And so I assume I was going to ask you what's a good bit of marketing, but to balance out the any fail or something you're sorry for, but it sounds like you immediately solved it with a great bit right there.
Yeah, I mean, it turned into something where we recognized the problems, we recognized that what wasn't working, and once we fixed those issues, now we're going to have this piece of promotional, educational material that we'll have on our website, that we'll have for social media, that we'll be able to send to patients, something that we'll have in our toolbox forever. That's going to be very helpful for people.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, give me a little bit about Elise Hamilton. Who is she? Where did she come from? How did she end up in marketing, and particularly marketing for a place like the NeuroMedical Center?
Yeah, so kind of all over the place to start. So I was a military brat. So my dad was a Coast Guard pilot, and so growing up, I bounced all over.
What are some places?
So I was born in Tampa. And then I lived in Alaska for a couple years. And that's where my sister was born.
My wife and I talk about, we traveled a lot in our van to California, Idaho, like all across the continental U.S.
Yeah.
Always wanted to take the excursion to Alaska and live there for a couple months. 100%.
Do it. My sister was born there. I mean, I want to take my husband back.
Anchorage?
Sitka.
Sitka. Oh, even better.
I know. It was. I'll have to send you some pictures. It was fantastic. And so a really cool experience. But going from Florida to Alaska, and then I went to we moved to the Outer Banks in North Carolina, Mobile, Alabama, and then New Orleans, and that's where I did high school. My dad retired. And so, being in New Orleans with high school, that's kind of how I got into, looking into LSU for college. And so did LSU right out of high school. I actually started as a chemical engineering degree, which is so funny looking back now because that is so not me. I don't know what I was thinking, but
I think we all go through that. If I still have my ACT test.
Yeah.
And on there, you had to prioritize 3 majors on it. And I looked at it a couple years ago. And number 1 was chemical engineering.
Right.
Number 2 was mechanical engineering. And number 3 was physics.
Maybe that's how we all started.
And then I ended up doing mass comm public relations at Nicholls State. I didn't even ended up not even go to a college that had these degrees.
It's like we all start off, and I think somehow we all end up pivoting. But yeah, so I started at chemical engineering, switched to accounting, and then finally ended up in mass comm, and I loved it. The manship school was fantastic and met a lot of friends there.
I've hired quite a few people from manship, and all of them just speak extraordinarily about the program over there.
It was fantastic. Actually, the picture of one of the crew members at JCW, Montana, she was in my capstone class in manship at LSU, and so, we've kind of full circle moment. We had our senior class together, and then we ended up in the operating room.
Is that how you kind of connected with JCW? Was from that connection, or?
Yeah, good little bit. Yeah, so I knew that she was there, and her and I have played beach volleyball together at Mangoes, and so kind of all these different connections of knowing her from school, knowing from Mangoes, the connections.
You never know when a relationship like that's gonna.
Lead to something
come
else.
Full circle, be beneficial to both parties. And so it's awesome that network had worked out for you in that way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But so, going from LSU, so right after LSU, I moved to Dallas, Texas. And I was,
boo.
I know, boo. Yeah, Cowboys.
Moved to Texas. You
Yuck.
graduated. Me and Patty were just talking about this on the episode yesterday. And we're talking about people that moved to Texas from Louisiana. Gordon had a little bit on it recently that went viral. And so you said, I was like, oh, no.
So,
well, I'm glad you're back, though. Thumbs up now that you're back.
That's the main thing. We came back. No, so many of our friends have gone to Texas, which is great. I get,
I understand it.
Got to do something different. I mean.
And you never know where your life's going to bring you and for what reason. There's many reasons, but I take pride in the place that we live, and I love it. I'm not one of those people that like, oh, can't wait to get out of here.
The second I graduate, I'm done.
I live here, so I'm gonna love it. I'm gonna find ways to love it. Yeah,
100%. I mean, and there was, I understand a lot of them wanting to go to Texas and everything, but because they, grew up in one spot. Being a military brat, I moved around so much. I was like, I'm staying put.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make I love it here. This is where I want to establish roots. But so anyways, I was in Texas doing event planning. Well, 3 months in, so I graduated December of 2019. 3 months into my job where I was planning pharmaceutical conferences for different, big pharma groups, COVID hits. And so, what's the first thing to go is, big events and big conferences. And so that's what led me back to Baton Rouge and ended up where I am now.
Okay. Where'd you go? So when you came back to Baton Rouge, you went straight to NeuroMedical Center?
No,
or
so
you
I
had to bounce around?
Dived a little bit in. So I was in the event planning industry, doing the hospitality, HRT roles, and then jumped into restaurant marketing. So I worked actually right next door, worked at Drago's for a little bit, doing their sales and events. And then I worked for a local Sonic franchise doing their marketing for a couple of years. But, learning different things in different industries has been great. But when I graduated school, I wanted to work in event planning with those pharma companies. I was, that was my plan. My husband was going to move out to Dallas with me. Like that was our plan. And then COVID obviously happened. And so when this opportunity presented itself to kind of get back into the healthcare field, to see the impact that you can make with your marketing, reaching patients and their families, it was a no-brainer.
Okay. And so now you're at NeuroMedical, and you've been doing the marketing there for how long?
A year. I actually make a year
Okay,
tomorrow.
you make a year tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you've already been in 6 brain surgeries.
Yeah. Casual.
So there's so many nuances to marketing in different fields, right? I market for a personal injury law firm. Sometimes people don't realize that. But marketing for a personal injury law firm or any law firm, right, is very different than when I was working on the automotive side.
Right.
But there's still threads that connect to it, right? But there's always these subtle little nuances and ways about doing things. And on my end, most stuff I do is business to consumer, right? And it's people buying a product or hiring you for a specific service relatively quickly. And I look at the healthcare field. One of the reasons I reached out to you is because I've always seen the NeuroMedical Center there. I know what it is, and it seems like I know it's about brain and spine, and that's just really cool, right? And so I'm curious how what are the nuances of marketing healthcare, specifically what the NeuroMedical Center does, and the things that from the outside looking in you wouldn't think are important to it.
Right. So I've, going into this, I kind of did an, analysis of, okay, what was everybody doing before? What was NeuroMed pushing out before? And I realized that, the brain and the spine and the nervous system, they're all very complex things. These are not easy topics that we're dealing with. I mean, these are, they involve a lot of serious procedures, serious illnesses. And so being able to get that across to patients that, we're able to handle these difficult topics, we're able to, treat these different things. But how do you do that? Do you just post something static on Facebook where it takes, a 2-second scroll? How do you reach people to let them know this is what we're doing? This is what our doctors are doing. And so I realized that video content was a huge, huge moment for us to be able to reach patients and their families. Everybody's scrolling on TikTok. Everybody watches Reels on Facebook. Yeah. So even being able to make a quick 30-second, blurb about, hey, this is, this doctor just joined our NeuroMedical Center and this is what they do and these are the type of procedures and, just being educational, but also, I want to humanize the doctors. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, a lot of health facilities, you can go on their websites and read a bio and look at their picture, but you don't get a sense of who that physician really is. You can read about their accolades, but I want to know, what is their personality like? What's their bedside manner going to be like? Because if I'm sending my sick parent to the doctor, I want to make sure they're in the best hands. And so showing our physicians and showing even our staff, on these different videos, on TikToks, on Reels, showing their personalities, that's been my main goal, to be able to reach people. I feel like, people look at healthcare and it's very cold and, it's scary, but I don't want it to be like that. I want it to be warm and inviting.
Yeah. And what's interesting about healthcare is like when you look at it, even as a marketer, you don't look at it so much like the marketing that you do as like I don't see it as marketing as much because I don't feel like their medical center is trying to get me buy something again, right?
No, right, trying to buy brain surgery.
So it's all about humanizing and making people feel the people who eventually need to utilize your services, make them feel comfortable when they are doing their research and digging into it a little bit more. Would that be correct?
Oh, absolutely.
How many physicians do y'all have?
34.
34.
Yep.
And you have to try to market each one of them?
Yeah. So marketing each one of them, and they're all scattered. So we've got multiple satellite locations across the state. And so, it's not everybody's in different cities. And so it's also marketing to different regions and, reaching people in different ways depending on where they are.
You're trying to get that specific physician marketed in that specific area?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And so, but the main thing, too, yes, we're all scattered and, the doctors are in different locations, but our main location is here in Perkins Row in Baton Rouge. And what sets us aside is that we're a multi-specialty group. We've got neurology, neurosurgery, pain management, neuropsychology, and neuroradiology all under one roof.
And I don't know what any of that is.
It's okay. And that's what I'm trying to portray to everyone. I'm trying to explain, watch my videos.
And my eyes got wide a little bit. I was like,
okay.
I don't know how to follow up to neuroradiology.
It's a lot, but.
And how has it been So it sounds like you've been going down the road of implementing a lot of social first strategies. Would that be correct?
Yep.
And that's probably been a big goal of yours. I would imagine that's a huge undertaking for a place like this, where it's healthcare, right? And it's not a local family doctor who you're just kind of dealing with and trying to promote that one person. You're trying to promote the business, multiple personalities, all that. So I imagine you have to talk to a lot of the doctors and try to get them on board with being on camera.
Yep.
So is that the hardest part of your job? Well, if you had to explaining neurology or getting the doctors to participate on camera, which is more difficult?
They're both challenging. They're both challenging, but I would say getting the doctors on camera. And look, so many of our doctors have been so, great and willing to participate. But I understand it's intimidating for them.
Yeah.
I mean, they are used to being, in clinic or in the operating room. They're not used to explaining what they do on camera, And so, getting them to, hey, get on board with my ideas, or, hey, let's do this trend. Will you do a TikTok trend and dance on camera? They're like, all right, looking at me like I got 5 heads.
One thing we're finding some success in is, obviously Gordon himself is a whole personality, right? And he's wonderful on camera. He's developed that over a course of many, many years. But they know their field so well, right? And so we'll have Gordon in here and have him talk. We'll give him prompts.
I get to meet Gordon today. Is that what is he coming right now?
He's not here today. Well, but we'll get you some stuff though. But we'll have a list of like 100 prompts, and we just guide him through those prompts, give him a little direction, and then, hey, Gordon, just talk to the camera about that, because he's been doing it for 30 plus years in the legal space. He can talk off the cuff about it, and I find that the content ends up being so much better when we do that, because it does sound natural, it does sound organic, it does sound like he's talking to you on the other side of the phone, as opposed to delivering a script or anything like that. And a lot of that also is the edit, right? Making the edit very, very dynamic, tight edits, getting rid of all of the spaces, getting rid of all the fluff, and bringing in some assets to help explain some of the things he's talking about. And that's one thing we've been doing a lot with him that we find very, very successful. Is that something that you would like to do for the doctors?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, my goal is to, humanize the doctors more, make them more personable. I would love for, patients to go on our socials and see a video of their doctor explaining a procedure, but in an invited way, not a, super technical way that, with medical terms that people don't understand, but in a way that's, approachable. Yeah. And, I want that to be the difference between us and other facilities, is that, our doctors are, wanting to reach our patients. They're wanting to put themselves out there on social media, and to be able to reach patients in this way.
Yeah. And speaking of like working with so many different people, and especially when they're not comfortable on camera, I find one of the best ways is creating proof of concepts, right? That stuff we've been doing with Gordon, I'll show that. If we decide to do another attorney, I'll show it to him. Be like, hey, listen, in the moment, you're going to be talking to camera. It's just going to sound like you're talking. It's going to sound like, who's going to listen to this? This is boring. I wouldn't listen to this, and I'm me, right? I like myself. But then you show them like, yeah, but this is what it's going to be. That 3 minutes of you talking is going to be this 35-second clip with zings and zooms and some sound effects underneath it, some music bed that brings a little interest, catches the attention, and has the user come along the journey with you and keep their interest, right? And that's I find that works really well. Yeah. And I've seen y'all kind of do your things. They're doing trends and everything. I was like, oh yeah, she's getting it. She's making them do some things. So that's fun to see.
Stepping out of their comfort zone a little bit. Whether I'm their favorite person or not, I don't know. It's kind of asking them to do
is there something that you really want to make happen that's just not quite there yet, or you're setting the steps in place for it?
Yeah, I would say just growing the socials altogether. I think our biggest following is on Facebook, which is great. Our target audience is a little bit older, because we're dealing with, patients who have these illnesses and and their families who are taking them to their doctor's appointments. But my goal is to grow TikTok, to grow Instagram, grow these social platforms that are typically geared towards, younger groups, and be able to reach the older groups. That way they can, see and, experience what we have to offer, and what our doctors have to offer.
Well, if you ever want to bounce ideas off, I just love talking shop. I've now fallen in love with doing the editing on my phone and CapCut. I never thought I would be into it, and then the more I've done it, and the more I'm seeing just how much better you can make content if you really just start getting your eye to it, understanding those platforms, and I love doing it now. And I'll even, when I make some stuff, I'll send it your way and go, hey, I did this for one of the lawyers, and I think it's going to work really well. I just want to send it to you as an idea for maybe you
for
you
one
to
of the
try.
doctors.
Yeah, I think talking between that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, is talking between marketers in different fields. It's just going to be beneficial to everybody. Yeah. Because ideas come from everywhere. I mean, just scrolling around on social media, I've seen stuff for things that have nothing to do with the legal industry, and I go, I want to do that. I want to try a version of that. I mean, I sat here late last night. I was at the studio, and I saw something on Instagram where the guy cloned himself, and I was like, oh, I want to clone myself. So I did like a promotion for the studio, and I cloned myself 5 times in one video. Oh, God. And I just learned that process. And it was a blast. And now we got this cool little video that maybe we could use for a promo or something. But it's seeing that stuff out there and then going, okay, we can do it. I'm gonna learn how to do that. And there's just so much resources out there to do that. Yeah. Outside of social media, are there other aspects of the healthcare marketing that y'all really put a lot of time and resources into?
Besides social media, actually being upfront and in person, having a booth at different events and, reaching people that way, I also have found to be pretty impactful as well.
Okay. Well, I want to end it with, if you had one piece of advice to give young Elise that was moving to Texas, what piece of advice would that be coming from Elise now?
I would tell her that, it always works out, and that, the road that you think you're destined to take is not always the road that you end up taking. And so, just follow your path and not stress too much about, where you have to be and, what you have to do, and, just kind of see where this field takes you. I mean, it is changing every day. And, I never thought, 6 years ago when I graduated LSU that I would be in the operating room of brain surgery, but here I am now, being able to use my gifts and my talents to reach people in this way, and it's just been fantastic.
Yeah, I would give her that warning that you're going to be looking at a lot of brains.
Give her a heads up.
And if I ever need brain surgery, I'm glad I now have a contact. I know who I'm going to be reaching out to.
100%. I got you.